Good evening, everyone. I'm Lester Holt, and welcome to the first Democratic debate in the 2020 race for president.
Hi, I'm Savannah Guthrie, and tonight it's our first chance to see these candidates go head-to-head on stage together. We'll be joined in our questioning tonight by our colleagues Jose Diaz-Balart, Chuck Todd, and Rachel Maddow.
Voters are trying to nail down where the candidates stand on the issues, what sets them apart, and which of these presidential hopefuls has
bear with
what
me
it
if I
takes.
try to work out
It's
some
time to find
technical
out.
issues.
Tonight, round one, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, former Housing Secretary Julian Castro, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio.
If all you're watching,
Congressman John
let me know if the audio is
Vermont
okay with,
Congresswoman Tulsi
as far as
Gabbard,
my audio
Washington
versus the
Governor
audio
Jay
of the
Inslee, Minnesota
actual
Senator Amy
debate.
Klobuchar, former Texas Congressman
Thanks.
Beto
So,
O'Rourke.
just to get
Ohio
started, my
Congressman
thoughts on
Tim
tonight.
Wyatt, and
So far, I'm
Massachusetts
going to
Senator
try to be as
Elizabeth
impartial as
Warren.
possible. Obviously, for
From
those who know me,
NBC
my
News,
channel,
decision
I'm not a
2020.
Democrat, and there's not any of them that I can see myself voting for, but I'm going to try to look at it and analyze it in two ways. One, what I think would be most effective in trying to win the primary for what some of these people do, and second, things that I might like that they say. So I'll admit my bias out of the get-go is I think the only one of the people on the stage tonight that I like is Tulsi Gabbard, and that's because I like her anti-war stance, but I dislike a lot of her domestic and progressive ideology. The person of this group that I think has the best chance of probably the only chance of this group to actually win the nomination would be Elizabeth Warren. The thing I respect about Warren, even though I dislike most of her policies, is she's kind of a policy wonk, and she's been out there kind of pushing at least a bunch of policies, unlike someone like Buttigieg, who's more of a cult of personality type person. So, again, if there's any problems with the audio, please let me know in the text there. I'm not going to run my mouth the entire way. I'm going to try to listen to a lot of what they're saying and just chime in with what I think is important. I think some other things just to look at, even if you don't like these Democrats or something like that, some things that'll be interesting to look at are, how do the moderators do? Are they asking leading questions? Do they have an apparent favorite? Are they allowing people to answer the questions? And another thing is, who stands out from the pack? Who's going to be able to separate themselves as maybe even the most extreme person on the left, or the person that would be the closest to being a moderate that might do well in a general election? So, again, I'm going to listen to them talk here a little, and they're going to be getting, I'll hear where they're at here real quick and see.
Americans say the economy is doing well, including 60% of Democrats. What do you say to those who worry this kind of significant change could be risky to the economy?
So I think of it this way. Who is this economy really working for? It's doing great for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. It's doing great for giant drug companies. It's just not doing great for people who are trying to get a prescription filled. It's doing great for people who want to invest in private prisons, just not for the African Americans and Latinx whose families are torn apart, whose lives are destroyed, and whose communities are ruined. It's doing great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who are watching climate change bear down upon us. When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. We need to call it out, we need to attack it head on, and we need to make structural change in our government, in our economy, and in our country.
Not a bad answer, but it's pandering to race. I don't see what race has to do with it. And also, wages have been going up around the board, including in places like rural America. The other thing that's a problem with that is, don't forget, the Democrats are the party of the extremely wealthy as well. So they continually pander that we need to punish the wealthy and they should pay more, but that's all them and their supporters, which leads you to show that that's not really what's going to happen. Listen to the next.
First, the economy. We know that not everyone is sharing in this prosperity, and Donald Trump just sits in the White House and gloats about what's going on when you have so many people that are having trouble affording college and having trouble affording their premiums. So I do get concerned about paying for college for rich kids. I do. But I think my plan is a good one, and my plan would be to, first of all, make community college free, and make sure that everyone else besides that top percentile gets help with their education.
There's two problems with this. One, education systems have become a bastion of like kind of liberal ideas that are censoring conservative viewpoints more and more. So of course Democrats are going to want more going into that. The second is when universities became as overpriced as they are right now, it was because the government got involved with guaranteed student loans, at least in my research of this. So what incentive will these colleges have to decrease prices if they're getting guaranteed government money? I don't see how this helps. And what's it do for my friends in rural Pennsylvania and elsewhere or inner cities that didn't have the intelligence or the grades to attend college, and so they just get screwed? The poorest and the people that need the help the most just get screwed, and their tax dollars goes to free college. It doesn't make sense.
And how much is actually doable. In that vein, some Democrats want a marginal individual tax rate of 70% on the very highest earners, those making more than $10 million a year. Would you support that? And if not, what would your top individual rate be?
This economy has got to work for everyone. And right now we know that it isn't. And it's going to take all of us coming together to make sure that it does. Necesitamos incluir cada persona en el éxito de esta economía. Pero si queremos hacer eso, necesitamos
ridiculous pandering. What does this have to do with anything? Americans should learn to speak English. I get that he's trying to pander to speak Spanish. What does that have to do with the question? This is ridiculous. Beto has no substance whatsoever.
Those who can pay for access and outcomes. That's how you explain an economy that is rigged to corporations and to the very wealthiest. A $2 trillion tax cut that favored corporations while they were sitting on record piles of cash, and the very wealthiest in this country at a time of historic wealth inequality. A new democracy that is revived because we returned power to the people, no PACs, no gerrymandering, automatic and same-day voter registration to bring in more voters, and a new voting rights act.
Again, the Democrats talk about this idea of getting corporate money out. Who did the corporations donate the most to in 2016 and 2018?
That's time, sir.
It constantly, you see this happen in California over and over again. The wealthiest Americans are these liberal elitists who constantly talk about the problems with elite people. It's them. They're criticizing themselves. They could make a change if they want. This just goes to show you they're disingenuous and they don't have a plan to actually help the economy. They're pandering to you, offering you free crap over and over again, hoping you vote for them. But in reality, they're not going to make any serious changes.
There is a debate in this party right now about the role of corporations, as you know. Senator Warren, in particular, put out a plan to break up tech companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google. You've said we should not, quote, be running around pointing at companies and breaking them up without any kind of process. Why do you disagree?
I don't think I disagree. I think we have a serious problem in our country with corporate consolidation. And you see the evidence of that in how dignity is being stripped from labor. And we have people that work full-time jobs and still can't make a living wage. We see that because consumer prices are being raised by pharmaceutical companies that often have monopolistic holds on drugs. And you see that by just the fact that this is actually an economy that's hurting small businesses and not allowing them to compete. One of the most aggressive bills.
How would things, they want to do things like raise the minimum wage. That'll kill small businesses. All the small businesses in my local area wouldn't be able to afford the $15 minimum wage they're talking about. So they'd be out of business immediately. Again, these are non-answers.
Low-income black and brown community. I see every single day that this economy is not working for average Americans. The indicators
he talks about black and brown community, but actually Trump's done more in his 2 years for black income, black wages, black job growth than Obama and the Democrats did in the 8 years that Obama had control of the economy.
Not just the wealthiest in our nation.
But quickly, Senator Booker, you did say that you didn't think it was right to name names, to name companies and single them out, as Senator Warren has. Briefly, why is that?
Well, again, I will single out companies like Halliburton or Amazon that pay nothing in taxes and are need to change that. And when it comes
notice
to
he won't single out companies that lean left-wing like Google that actually have just came out and said they admitted that their internal memos show they're influencing elections, hacking our election, quote-unquote.
This kind of corporate concentration. At the end of the day, we have too much of a problem with corporate power growing. We see that with everything from Citizens United and the way they're trying to influence Washington. It's about time that we have a president that fights for the people in this country who need to have someone that's a champion for them.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, I mentioned you. Are you picking winners and losers?
So the way I understand this is there is way too much consolidation now in giant industries in this country. That hurts workers, it hurts small businesses, it hurts independent farmers, it hurts our economy overall, and it helps constrict real innovation and growth in this economy. Now look, we've had the laws out there for a long time to be able to fight back. What's been missing is courage. Courage in Washington to take on the giants. That's part of the corruption in this system. It has been far too long that the monopolies have been making the campaign contributions, have been funding the super PACs, have been out there.
I actually agree with a lot of what she's saying here. We do have laws against monopolies on the books. We have laws against election interference. We have laws against donating goods and services to elections, to campaigns, and we don't enforce those. That's exactly what happened in the 2008 banking sector. So I actually agree with a lot of what she said there. It's too bad she has this racial tinge.
Democrats have been talking about the pay gap for decades. What would you do to ensure that women are paid fairly in this country?
Thank you very much for that question, Lester. You know, I grew up with a mother who raised my brother Joaquin and me as a single parent. And I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to rent a home and to worry about whether you're going to be able to pay the rent at the first of the month, and to see a mom work very, very hard and know that moms across this country are getting paid less simply because they're women. I would do several things, starting with something we should have done a long time ago, which is to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, finally in this country, and also pursue legislation so that women are paid equal pay for equal work in this country. It's
pay gap's a myth. You already can't discriminate based on race or gender. Those laws are already on the books. The laws that they're proposing are actually discriminatory laws that say that we're no longer allowed to pay people based on their value or the hours they work or their experience, and we have to pay people based purely on their gender.
First of all, let's recognize
that's terrible. Paying based on the outcome is the first step to tyranny.
Who will put your interests ahead of the rich and powerful. That's not what we have right now. I enlisted in the Army National Guard after the al-Qaeda terror attacks on 9/11, so I could go after those who had attacked us on that day. I still serve as a major, served over 16 years, deployed twice to the Middle East, and in Congress serve on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees for over 6 years. I know the importance of our national security, as well as the terribly high cost of war. And for too long, our leaders have failed us, taking us from one regime change war to the next, leading us into a new Cold War and arms race, costing us trillions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars and countless lives. This insanity must end. As president, I will take your hard-earned taxpayer dollars and instead invest those dollars into serving your needs. Things like health care, a green economy, good-paying jobs, protecting our environment, and so much more.
Mayor,
she's right about the war stuff. I mean, she is. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have a robust military that we're spending a lot on, but these regime change wars are ridiculous, and we could be spending much more on the actual troops as opposed to kind of this military-industrial complex and having bases all over the world.
We've been addressing income inequality in New York City by raising wages, by raising benefits, by putting money back in the hands of working people, $15 minimum wage, paid sick days, pre-K for all, things that are making a huge difference in working people's lives. But let me tell you, what we're hearing here already in the first round of questions is that battle for the heart and soul of our party. I want to make it clear. This is supposed to be the party of working people. Yes, we're supposed to be for a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. Yes, we're supposed to be for free college, free public college for our young people. We are supposed to break up big corporations when they're not serving our democracy. This Democratic Party has to be strong and bold and progressive. And in New York, we've proven that we can do something very different. We can put money back in the hands of working people. And let me tell you, every time you talk about investing in people and their communities, you hear folks say there's not enough money. What I say to them every single time is there's plenty of money in this world. There's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. We Democrats have to fix that.
Congressman Delaney, do you agree?
You said nothing, basically.
I think we need to do real things
that
to
never
help
works.
American workers and the American people, right? This is the issue that all of us here on the campaign trail. We need to make sure everyone has a living wage. And I've called for a doubling of the earned income tax credit raising the minimum wage, and creating paid family leave. That will create a situation where people actually have a living wage. That gets right to workers. Then we got to fix our public education system. It's not delivering the results our kids need, nor is college and post-high school career and technical training programs doing that. You know, I'm very different than everyone else here on the stage. Prior to being in Congress, I was an entrepreneur. I started 2 businesses. I created thousands of jobs. I spent my whole career helping small to mid-sized businesses all over the country. 5,000 of them I supported. The Obama administration gave me an award for lending to disadvantaged communities. I know how to create jobs. We need a short-term strategy, which is to put money in the pockets of workers with the earned income tax credit, raising the minimum wage and created paid family leave. And then we need to have a long-term strategy to make sure this country is competitive and we're creating jobs everywhere in this country.
Governor Inslee, how would you address
the minimum wage I disagree with increasing.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised. I think plans are great, but I'm a governor, and we got to realize the people who brought us the weekend, unions, are going to bring us a long overdue raise in America. And I'm proud of standing up for unions. I've got a plan to reinvigorate collective bargaining so we can increase wages finally. I marched with the SEIU folks. It is not right that the CEO of McDonald's makes 2,100 times more than the people slinging hash at McDonald's. And the next thing I'll do is put people to work in the jobs of the present and the future. Look at Donald Trump is simply wrong. He says wind turbines cause cancer. We know they cause jobs. And we know that we can put millions of people to work in the clean energy jobs of the future. Carpenters, IBEW's members, machinists. We're doing it in my state today. And then we can do what America always does. Lead the world and invent the future and put people to work. That's what we're going to do.
America's done that by not having the government interfere. That's why we're able to have energy supremacy around the world. Every time the government gets involved, we end up with situations like Solyndra. How did that work out? $500 million to Obama's
Yes, I believe you can. But first, let's say the president came, he said, don't sell your house to people in Youngstown, Ohio. And in his administration, just in the last 2 years, we lost 4,000 jobs at a General Motors facility. That rippled throughout our community. General Motors got a tax cut. General Motors got a bailout. And then they have the audacity to move a new car that they're going to produce to Mexico. I've had family members that have to unbolt a machine from the factory floor, put it in a box, and ship it to China. My area where I come from in Northeast Ohio, this issue we're talking about here, it's been going on 40 years. This is not a new phenomenon in the United States of America. The bottom 60% haven't seen a raise since 1980. Meanwhile, the top 1% control 90% of the wealth. We need an industrial policy saying we're going to dominate building electric vehicles. There's going to be 30 million made in the next 10 years. I want half of them made in the United States. I want to dominate the solar industry and manufacture those here in the United States.
Senator Warren.
But again, that sounds like a pro-tariff policy, saying not allow these companies to go outside and build products. So what is their problem with Trump and the tariff level?
Corporations do whatever they want to do. Giant corporations have exactly one loyalty, and that is to profits. And if they can save a nickel by moving a job to Mexico or to Asia or to Canada, they're going to do it. So here's what I propose for an industrial policy. Start with a place where there's a real need. There's going to be a worldwide need for green technology, ways to clean up the air, ways to clean up the water. And we can be the ones to provide that. We need to go tenfold in our research and development on green energy going forward. And then we need to say, any corporation can come and use that research. They can make all kinds of products from it, but they have to be manufactured right here in the United States of America. And then we have to double down and sell it around the world.
See, again, like Warren's one of the people that have criticized Trump's tariffs. But now she's saying we will force companies to have to operate in the United States. That's kind of a protectionist type policy. So it just seems like they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this. Why couldn't they be encouraged to come here and work on green energy without government
the issue of healthcare right now? I'd really try to understand where there may or may not be daylight between you. Many people watching at home have health insurance coverage through their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Just a show of hands, start off with. All right, well, Senator Klobuchar, let me put the question to you. You're one of the Democrats who wants to keep private insurance in addition to a government.
So remember, if you have good
plan.
insurance right now,
why is an incramental
they want
approach
Elizabeth
in your
Warren
view
wants
better
to end
than
it.
a sweeping overhaul?
Well, I think it's a bold approach. It's something that Barack Obama wanted to do when we were working on the Affordable Care Act, and that is a public option. I am just simply concerned about kicking half of America off of their health insurance in 4 years, which is exactly what this bill says. So let me go on beyond that. There is a much bigger issue in addition to that, and that is pharmaceuticals. The president literally went on TV, on Fox, and said that people's heads would spin when they see how much he would bring down pharmaceutical prices. Instead, 2,500 drugs have gone up in double digits since he came into office. Instead, he gave $100 billion in giveaways to the pharma companies. For the rest of us, for the rest of America, that's what we call at home, all foam and no beer. We got nothing out of it. And so my proposal is to do something about pharma, to take them on, to allow negotiation under Medicare, to bring in less expensive drugs from other countries. And pharma thinks they own Washington. Well, they don't own me.
I don't disagree with what she says there. We do need to
Warren,
decrease
you signed on to
pharmaceutical,
Bernie
go after these
Sanders'
companies and
Medicare
lower
for all
prices.
plan.
But
It would put
again, what if
essentially everybody
hopefully
on
her plan's
Medicare and
better,
then
but what if the
eliminate
Democrats done well?
private
They've
plans
had
that
control of
offer
the
similar
House or
coverage.
under Obama.
Is
I don't
that
know.
the
So
plan
it
or
seems like
path
all
that
bluster.
you would pursue as president?
So yes, I'm with Bernie on Medicare for all, and let me tell you why. I've spent a big chunk of my life studying why families go broke. And one of the #1 reasons is the cost of health care, medical bills. And that's not just for people who don't have insurance, it's for people who have insurance. Look at the business model of an insurance company. It's to bring in as many dollars as they can in premiums and to pay out as few dollars as possible for your health care. That leaves families with rising premiums, rising co-pays, and fighting with insurance companies to try to get the health care that their doctors say that they and their children need. Medicare for all solves that problem. And I understand there are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it. Well, health care is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
I've noticed she doesn't talk about the price tag. She doesn't mention that she admits she's going to kick 80% of people off their insurance. And when you say that it's a basic human right, then you open the door to the government. Once the government has control over healthcare and you're saying it's a right, what's to stop them from saying, oh, you're someone like Rob, you're overweight, you can't eat chips anymore, you can't do this because it's a basic human right. Your actions are hurting other people's human rights by driving up the cost of healthcare. It's a very dangerous game once you have the government
skin into that. He was told he had glaucoma, and he was told untreated because he doesn't have health care, he'll be dead before the age of 40. So getting to guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care as quickly and surely as possible has to be our goal. The ability to afford your prescriptions and go to a primary care provider, the ability to see a mental health care provider. In Texas, the single largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system today. And healthcare also has to mean that every woman can make her own decisions about her own body and has access to the care that makes that possible. Our
good of him to pander
says
to
that if you're uninsured, we enroll you in Medicare.
It's not that simple.
If you're
a woman shouldn't have the right to
your
kill a
premiums, we enroll you in Medicare.
Baby.
But if you're a member of a union that negotiated for a health care plan that you like because it works for you and your family, you're able to keep it. We preserve choice by making sure that everybody has health care.
Time is up, Congressman, but I do want to ask a follow-up on this one. Just to be very clear, I'll give you 10 seconds. Would you replace private insurance?
No, I think that choice is fundamental to our ability to get everybody cared for.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses, it's not working.
That's
How
right.
can you defend
for
a
those
system
for
that's
whom it's not working, they can choose Medicare. For the culinary workers in Nevada who I listened to, who negotiated for those plans,
for people,
they're able to keep them.
Why are you defending private insurance?
Say they like their private health insurance, by the way. It should be noted that 100 million Americans. I mean, I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken.
All right,
I mean,
smart.
Doesn't that make sense? I mean, we should give everyone in this country health care as a basic human right for free. Full stop. But we should also give them the option to buy private insurance? Why do we have to stand for taking away something from people? And also, it's bad policy. If you go to every hospital in this country and you ask them one question, which is, how would it have been for you last year if every one of your bills were paid at the Medicare rate? Every single hospital administrator said they would close. And the Medicare for All bill requires payments to stay at current Medicare rates. So to some extent, we're basically supporting a bill that will have every hospital close. I mean, my dad was a union electrician, right? I actually grew up in a working class family. He loved the health care that the IBEW gave him. And I just always think about my dad and anything I would do from a policy perspective. He'd look at me and he'd say, good job, John, for getting health care for every American. But why are you taking my health care
I've let this play out a little bit because I'm fascinated to hear the daylight.
Good answer.
Congressman Gabbard,
Yes.
weigh in here.
I think we're talking about this in the wrong way. You're talking about one bill over another bill. Really what we're talking about is our objective, making sure that every single sick American in this country is able to get the health care that they need. I believe Medicare for All is the way to do that. I also think that employers will recognize how much money will be saved by supporting a Medicare for All program, a program that will reduce the administrative costs, reduce the bureaucratic costs,
There's
and make
another
sure that
debate
everyone
tomorrow,
gets that
Jesse.
quality
This is only
health
half
care
the-
that they need. I also think if you look at other countries in the world who have universal health care, every one of them has some form of a role of private insurance. So I think that's what we've got to look at, taking the best of these ideas, but making sure unequivocally that no sick American goes without getting the care that they need, regardless of how much or little money they have.
I'll just
in their
add real
pocket.
quick here, most of the people saying that everyone should have coverage are also de facto open border people. And there's no way we have enough money to pay for that.
First of all, we're talking about this as a healthcare issue, but in communities like mine, low-income communities like mine, it's an education issue because kids who don't have health care are not going to succeed in school. It is an issue for jobs and employment because people that do not have good health care do not succeed at work. It's even a retirement issue because in my community, African Americans have a lower life expectancy because of poorer health care. And so where I stand is very clear. Health care is not just a human right, it should be an American right. And I believe the best way to get there is Medicare for All. But I have an urgency about this. When I am president of the United States, I'm not going to wait. We have to do the things immediately that are going to provide better care. And on this debate, I'm sorry. There are too many people profiteering off of the pain of people in America, from pharmaceutical companies to insurers. Literally, the overhead for insurers that they charge is 15%, while Medicare's overhead is only at 2%. We can do this better, and every single day I will be fighting to give people more access at more affordable costs until we get to my goal, which is every American having health care.
Time is up, Senator. I want to move back, if I can, to Congressman Gabbard.
Point, though, and that is that the insurance companies last year alone sucked $23 billion in profits out of the healthcare system. $23 billion, and that doesn't count the money that was paid to executives, the money that was spent lobbying Washington. We have a giant industry that wants our healthcare system to stay the way it is because it's not working for families.
Listen, it was your party and Obama that forced people to buy the products from these unethical people.
Families come first.
Why would that be the case?
It should not be an option in the United States of America for any insurance company to deny women coverage for their exercise of their right of choice. And I am the only candidate here who has passed a law protecting a woman's right of reproductive health and health insurance. And I'm the only candidate who has passed a public option. And I respect everybody's goals and plans here. But we do have one candidate that's actually advanced the ball. And we got to have access for everyone. I've done it as a public option.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to get you. I'm fascinated by this, Senator Klobuchar.
I just want to say there's 3 women up here that have fought pretty hard for a woman's right to choose. So I'll start with that. And then I just want to make very clear, I think we share the goal of universal health care. And the idea I put out there, the public option, which the governor was just talking about, this idea is that you use Medicare or Medicaid without any insurance companies involved. You could do it either way. And the estimates are 13 million people would see a reduction in their premiums. 12 more million people would get covered. So I think it is a beginning and the way you start and the way you move to universal health care.
Secretary Castro, this one is for you, all of you on stage. support a woman's right to an abortion. You all support some version of a government health care option. Would your plan cover abortion, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, it would. I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice. And what that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget, someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise
Men should have abortions
that right
too.
to choose. And
Good
so
stuff.
I absolutely would cover the right to have an abortion. More than that, everybody in this crowd and watching at home knows that in our country today, a person's right to choose is under assault in places like Missouri, in Alabama, in Georgia. I would appoint judges to the federal bench that understand the precedent of Roe v. Wade and will respect it.
Right,
And
terrible
in addition to
precedent,
that,
regardless
make
of
sure
what you
that we
think of
fight
abortion.
hard as we transition our healthcare system to one where everybody can get and exercise that right.
Senator Warren, would you put limits
Castro
on,
winning the
any
woke
limits on
contest
abortion?
with gotta respect
I
trans
would make
people's
certain
abortions.
that every woman has access to the full range of reproductive health care services, and that includes birth control, it includes abortion, it includes everything for a woman. And I want to add on that, it's not enough for us to expect the courts to protect us. 47 years ago, Roe versus Wade was decided, and we've all looked to the courts all that time as state after state has undermined Roe, has put in exceptions, has come right up to the edge of taking away protection.
Your time is up, Senator.
We now have an America where most people support Roe versus Wade. We need to make that
Senator,
federal
you're over.
law.
Thank you. Jose?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Booker, I want to
Pass an
come
amendment,
back
see
on
what
the
people think.
discussion we were having about health and the opioid crisis. You represent a state where 14 of the 20 largest pharmaceutical companies are based. Should pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these drugs be held criminally liable for what they do?
They should absolutely be held criminally liable because they are liable and responsible. This is one of the reasons why, well before I was running for president, I said I would not take contributions from pharma companies, not take contributions from corporate PACs or pharma executives, because they are part of this problem. And this opioid addiction in our country, we in cities like mine have been seeing how we've tried to arrest our way out of addiction for too long. It is time that we have a national urgency to deal with this problem and make the solutions that are working to actually be the law of our land and make the pharmaceutical companies that are responsible help to pay for that.
Congressman O'Rourke, how would you deal with it?
Tonight in this country, you have 2.3 million of our fellow Americans behind bars. It's the largest prison population on the face of the planet. Many are there for nonviolent drug crimes, including possession of marijuana, at a time that more than half the states have legalized it or decriminalized it. And yet, despite what Purdue Pharma has done, their connection to the opioid crisis and the overdose deaths that we're seeing throughout this country, they've been able to act with complete impunity and pay no consequences, not a single night in jail. Unless there's accountability and justice, this crisis will continue. In my administration, we will hold them to account. We will make sure that they pay a price, and we will help those who've been victims of this malfeasance in this country, get them treatment and long-term care.
I know immigration is on a lot of
It's a very
your minds
complicated
here,
issue, it really is.
and I want
You have to be careful just blaming everyone in the
We'll be back
pharmaceutical
with more
company.
from
Like,
Miami after
but
this.
those that broke the law and intentionally prescribed medication, I do think that that's a terrible thing, and that there should be some accountability. So far, I'm not overly impressed by anyone in the debate. I didn't think anyone really stood out. But, I mean, in their defense, they're kind of getting red meat questions like, oh, you're all pro-life. Oh, you're all for Medicare for all. Oh, the opioid crisis. So, at least there was a little bit of disagreement on whether or not there should be a public option or not. I think Warren and Delaney, I believe, was the other one that went for that, make a huge mistake wanting to get rid of the public option. I do agree with the others that said that even though I might not be for a Medicare for all type policy, I do think that we need kind of a multi-pronged approach. So I think that even though I'm not their target audience, to me, that would be preferable. Let's hope they get into some issues where there's some more kind of disagreement. It's okay to disagree. You know, that I think you get more out of people than disagreeing. Just everyone sitting around and trying to be more woke than the next person, I think, is not that impressive. I will have to give it to Castro for the comment of the debate so far, as It's not just women's reproductive rights, you know, let's not forget trans men could also have babies. Yeah, okay, whatever. This is the party that claims that their opponents are denying science. So they said we're going to talk about climate change next, so let's see what they have to say with that. Now remember, when they're talking about all these big policies, it's important to remember, it's not just in a vacuum, right? These policies also come while they're basically de facto operating for open borders. And by that I mean, like, they're saying, oh, you can't have detention centers. The state of these detention centers is terrible, but we're not going to give more money to make the state of them better for the people. So what are they suggesting? We'll just release the people, basically. So keep that in mind. They want to give out free stuff for everyone, including for everyone illegal who wants to come here. So I'll shut up now.
In the news, especially this week, there are undocumented children being held alone in detention, even as close as Homestead, Florida, right here, less than 30 miles from where we are tonight. Fathers and mothers and children are dying while trying to enter the United States of America. We saw that image today that broke our hearts, and they had names. Oscar Martinez and his 23-month-old daughter Valeria died trying to cross the river to ask for asylum in this country. Last month, more than 130,000 migrants were apprehended.
I'm sure this moderator is one of the guys that told us there wasn't a crisis,
if you were
right?
president today, hoy, what would you specifically do?
Thank you very much, Jose. I'm very proud that in April I became the first candidate to put forward a comprehensive immigration plan. And we saw those images. Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river. They have been playing games with people.
No, you're wrong, Castro. Your policy of virtue signaling to the world that if you come here, you'll be able to stay. It's what encourages people like that to make the risky journey. It's not just the Rio Grande that's dangerous. It's all these people paying coyotes to come here from Central America, even Africa, the whole way through Mexico, that are raped, abused, taken advantage of over and over again, face harsh conditions, starvation, things like that, because people like you virtue signal to encourage them to make that trip. Now when people die after you denied that there was a crisis, you try to blame your opponents. It's disingenuous and disgusting, and these types of policies will not only hurt American citizens, but hurts the very people that he's suggesting that we help by making sure that they have every incentive to try to make that dangerous trip. It's disgusting pandering.
Senator Booker, what would you do on day one? And this is a situation that the next president will inherit.
La situación ahora es inaceptable. Este presidente ha atacado, ha demonizado los inmigrantes. Es inaceptable y voy a cambiar este. On day one, I will make sure that, number one, we end the ICE policies and the customs and border policies that are violating the human rights. When people come to this country, they do not leave their human rights at the border. Number two,
so what, no detention?
That we reinstate DACA, that we reinstate pathways to citizenship for DACA recipients, and to make sure that people that are here on temporary protected status can stay and remain here. And then finally, we need to make sure that we address the issues that made Oscar and Valeria come in the first place by making major investments in the Northern Triangle, not like this president is doing.
That's right. See, it's our fault. It's America's fault. We need to give money to the foreigners. We need to allow paths to citizenship. We can't detain people. Where's all this money coming from?
And our values.
Screw the poor in his community. Screw the opioid crisis. Screw all them. It's just money, money, money. Pander more and more. Sorry, not impressed by you speaking Spanish either, Booker.
Senator Warren and Governor Inslee agree with me on this. My plan also includes getting rid of Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, to go back to the way we used to treat this when somebody comes across the border, not to criminalize desperation, to treat that as a civil violation. And
yep, it's not a crime.
And here's why it's important. We see all of this horrendous family separation. They use that law, Section 1325, to justify under the law separating little children from their families. And so I want to challenge every
Keep in mind, they said nothing under Obama when he did it. And second, the reason that they're separated is because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said you couldn't detain children in the same spot as adults. And many adults are not the actual parents that are exploiting and human trafficking these children. That's what they're advocating for.
Parents from their American children, spouses and the like, and are creating fear in cities all across this country where parents are afraid to even drop their kids off to school or go to work. We must end those policies as well.
Discussion about immigration in this country, because look at the bottom line here. That tragic photo of that parent, that child, and I'm saying this as a father. Every American should feel that in their heart, and every American should say that is not America. Those are not our values, but we have to get under the skin of why we have this crisis in our system, because we're not being honest about the division that's been fomented in this country. The way that American citizens have been told that immigrants somehow created their misery and their pain and their challenges. For all the American citizens out there who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you, the immigrants didn't do that to you. The big corporations.
Notice how he conflates immigration and illegal immigration. That's not the case. And what does any of this have to do? He says this terrible tragedy of these people dying. What does the corporation have to do with that? Absolute pandering garbage.
That we're going to be on their side every single time against those big corporations who created this mess to begin with. And remind people we're all in this together. If we don't change that debate, that politics that's holding us back, we won't get all these reforms people are talking about. That's what we need to do as Democrats.
Congresista, if I could, I'm sorry. Congresista O'Rourke, ¿qué haría usted en el primer día, si usted es presidente, sobre esta realidad que está ocurriendo? What would you do, Congressman, day one at the White House?
Vamos a tratar cada
This is so
persona con el
stupid.
respeto
Absolute
y dignidad
stupidity.
que merecen.
By the way, most
humanos.
legal migrants
We would
don't
not
mind
turn
speaking English
back
whatsoever.
Valeria
This
and Father
tribalism
Oscar.
of,
We would accept them into this
I'm
country
so
and
cool,
follow
I can speak
our own
Spanish.
asylum laws. We would not
It's
build
ridiculous.
walls. We would not put kids in cages. In fact, we would spare no expense to reunite the families that have been separated already. And we would not criminally prosecute any family who is fleeing violence and persecution. We would make sure.
Secretary, let him finish, and I will give you. But let him finish. Let him finish, please. Yes.
We would not detain any family fleeing violence, in fact, fleeing the deadliest countries on the face of the planet today. We would implement a family case management program so they could be cared for in the community.
They won't even give money for beds for these
and then
kids.
We would rewrite our
They said it wasn't a crisis. Now that's all they can say.
Free
This is
dreamers
un-American. It's
forever
terrible.
many fear
6
of
months ago,
deportation
these people
by
told us,
making
what
them
crisis?
US
There's no
citizens here
problem.
in this country.
They voted against a wall.
Invest in
They voted
solutions
against
in Central
stopping
America,
these
work
people
with
coming in.
regional
And they
stakeholders
voted
so there's
against
no reason
increasing
to
funding
make that
for these
2,000
border
mile journey
stations.
to
Secretary, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Let's be very clear. The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that.
So in other words, if you come with a kid, you're not detained. That's what Castro just said. So we totally virtue signaled, and so you'll see more kids and parents like that one that died trying to cross the Rio Grande, trying to come here because they know if you bring a kid, you could get in, bar none.
That would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country.
I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. But let me tell you what. Section 18, Title 18 of the U.S.
Do you hear what Castro just said? He's not talking about asylum seekers. Anyone who wants to come here, even if it's not for asylum, should not be detained. Now watch the virtue signaling as they all attempt to agree with that. That's what the Democrats want. Don't be mistaken. Plus free health care and free college for all of them and all this other great stuff.
Talk about the conditions to why people are coming here.
Let's Lester,
because
Savannah, sorry, Savannah. I know. it's just, we could go on.
But rather than talk about specific provisions, we really have to talk about why these people are coming to our country and what are we going to do to actually make a difference in these countries.
Congressman, you'll get your chance. Let's continue the discussion. Senator Klobuchar, let's talk about what Secretary Castro just said. He wants to no longer have it be a crime to illegally cross the border. Do you support that? Do you think it should be a civil offense only? And if so, do you worry about potentially incentivizing people to come here?
Immigrants, they do not diminish America. They are America. And I am happy to look at.
We're talking about illegal immigration,
if you want to
not
make
legal.
sure that you have provisions in place that allow you to go after traffickers and allow you to go after people who are violating the law. What I really think we need to step back and talk about is the economic imperative here. And that is that 70 of our Fortune 500 companies are headed up by people that came from other countries. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. We have a situation right now where we need workers in our fields and in our factories. We need them to start small businesses. We need their ideas. And this president has literally gone backwards at a time where our economy needs immigrants. And so my proposal is to look at that 2013 bill that passed the Senate with Republican support.
She didn't answer the question, by the way, whether or not she would make it. How hard would it be to say no, illegal immigration is still a crime? She can't say it. None of them will say it, by the way. Maybe one or two, but the mainstream ones won't say it. It's garbage. This is a garbage answer. Again, it's insulting to the legal immigrants that came to this country to conflate them with illegal immigration. That's why upwards of some polls say 40% of Hispanics are with Donald Trump and saying we're tired of being conflated with illegal immigrants.
Provisions in the law that will allow you to prosecute people for coming over here if they're dealing in drugs and other things. That's already established in the law. So there's no need to repeat it. And I think it's abhorrent. We're talking about this father who got killed with his daughter. And the issues here, the way these kids are being treated, if you go to Guantanamo Bay, there are terrorists that are held that get better health care than those kids that have tried to cross the border in the United States. That needs to stop. And I think the president should immediately ask doctors and nurses to go immediately down to the border and start taking care of these kids. What kind of country
Your party voted against calling it a crisis and sending money. How can you be this disingenuous? Good job on these moderators. They did ask one question, do you think that would incentivize, but that's it. Absolute garbage from all these people.
With 3-week-old diapers that haven't been changed. We've got to tell this president that is not a sign of strength.
By the way, a lot of the pictures that are showed that they're talking about how horrible it is for these kids was under Obama. Not one of these people said a word under it. They only care about these kids when it can help get them elected.
What will you do with the fact that you will have families here? There's been a lot of talk about what you'll do in the first 100 days, about legislation. What will you actually do with these families? How will you care for them? Will they be detained or will they not be?
Well, this is a related and brief point, because what we're talking about, what Secretary Castro and I are talking about, is that we have the power to better deal with this problem through the civil process than the criminal process. I have been to some of the largest private prisons, which are repugnant to me, that people are profiting off incarceration and their immigration lockups. Our country has made so many mistakes by criminalizing things, whether it's immigration, whether it's mental illness, whether it's addiction. We know that this is not the way to deal with problems. There is a humane way that affirms human rights.
Over 90% of people released at the border that are seeking asylum for whatever reason or are illegals don't show up to their court hearing. So how do you enforce it civilly?
Investments in the Northern Triangle to stop the reasons why people are being driven here in the first place. And we make sure we use our resources to provide health care, to affirm the values and human dignity of the people that come here, because we cannot sacrifice our values, our ideals as a nation for border security. We can have both by doing this the right way.
No, we can't. There is no security if you're not detained. He didn't answer the question. Would you detain them? Again, chalk it up. Not one person said they would detain illegals.
Cory Booker, I have yet to hear an answer from anyone on this stage. What will you do with the families that will be here?
There is no reason for the detention and separation of these children. They should be released pending their hearings, and they should have a hearing and the law should be followed. That's what should happen. And we should do what we're doing in Washington State. I'm proud that we've passed a law that prevents local law enforcement from being turned into mini ICE agents. I'm proud to have been the first governor to stand up against Donald Trump's heinous Muslim ban. I'm proud to be a person who's not only talked about dreamers, but being one of the first to make sure that they get a college education so that they can realize their dreams. These are some of the most inspirational people in our state. And I'll leave you with this thought if you want to know what I think. Donald Trump the other day tried to threaten me. He thought it was a threat to tell me that he would send refugees in Washington state if we passed the law that I passed. And I told him that's not a threat at all. We welcome refugees into our state.
Sure.
We recognize diversity as a strength.
Yep.
This is how we've built America.
Don't detain anyone. We'll take all illegals. We'll take them in my state. That's the guy you want running your country?
Another topic now. We've got a
You see the insanity. Not what person said they would detain illegal immigrants.
From his family when he came to this country.
We're going to talk about Iran right now because we're working against the clock. Tankers have been attacked. A U.S. drone has been shot down. There have been disturbing threats issued by both the U.S. and Iranian leadership. I'd like, if you can, just for a moment, to put aside how you think we may have gotten here. But what I want to know is, how do you dial it back? So a show of hands, who as president would sign on to the 2015 nuclear deal as it was originally negotiated? Well, Senator Booker, why not?
May I address that? First and foremost, it was a mistake to pull out of that deal. And one of the reasons why we're seeing this hostility now is because Donald Trump is marching us to a far more dangerous situation. Literally, he took us out of the deal and gave us transparency into their nuclear program.
Syria,
and
attack
pushed
Russia,
back
attack
that nuclear
Libya,
breakout
attack
10,
Afghanistan,
20
attack
years.
Iraq.
And now we see Iran threatening to go further, and we're being pulled in further and further into this crisis. We need to renegotiate and get back into a deal, but I'm not going to have a primary platform to say unilaterally I'm going to rejoin that deal, because when I'm president of the United States, I'm going to do the best I can to secure this country and that region and make sure that if I have an opportunity to leverage a better deal, I'm going to do it.
All right, Senator Klobuchar, I'd like you to answer that question because you said you would negotiate yourself back into the Iranian agreement. Can you argue that that nuclear pact, as it was ratified, was a good deal?
Yes, it was.
It was imperfect, but it was a good deal for that moment.
Okay, now consider what they're saying. Do you think if Donald Trump sends $500 billion of cash to Kim Jong-un in hopes of having some kind of deal, that they'll say that was a good deal? They'll say he just gave money to terrorists. Keep in mind, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, admitted they knew some of that money would go to terrorists that they sent to Iran in the middle of the night. They lied to the American people about sending that money. I'm all for diplomacy. I am. But that was egregious. No, I don't want war with Iran.
So what I
but
would
these people are full of it.
Negotiate us back into that agreement, is stand with our allies and not give unlimited leverage to China and Russia, which is what he has done. And then, finally, I would make sure that if there is any possibility of a conflict, and we're having this debate in Congress right now, that he comes to Congress for an authorization of military force. I would do that.
There should be congressional authorization. I agree with that. Where were they during Obama's litany of bombings and
going
wars?
to war, one tweet away from going to war, and I don't think we should conduct foreign policy in our bathrobe at 5 in the morning.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you've said you would sign back onto the 2015 deal. Would you insist, though, that it address Iran's support for Hezbollah?
Let's deal with the situation where we are, where this president and his chicken hawk cabinet have led us to the brink of war with Iran. I served in the war in Iraq at the height of the war in 2005, a war that took over 4,000 of my brothers and sisters in uniforms' lives. The American people need to understand that this war with Iran would be far more devastating, far more costly than anything that we ever saw in Iraq. It would take many more lives. It would exacerbate the refugee crisis, and it wouldn't be just contained within Iran. This would turn into a regional war. This is why it's so important that every one of us, every single American, stand up and say, no war with Iran. We need to get back into the Iran nuclear agreement, and we need to negotiate how we can improve it. It was an imperfect deal. There are issues like their missile development that needs to be addressed. We can do both simultaneously to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and preventing us from going to war.
Your time is up, and I have just a very quick follow-up. Well, what would your red line be for military action against Iran?
Look, obviously, if there was an attack against the our troops, then there would have to be a response. But my point is, and it's important for us to recognize this,
and I like Tulsi on her foreign policy. We should have diplomacy as the first option. And she's someone who says that over and over. What I don't like about her answer is, why doesn't she call out all the other people on the stage, at least as far as I know, all of them, that supported strikes in Syria? She was very good against being against the strikes in Syria, as far as I'm concerned. So that's an opportunity missed for her to stand out.
Mayor de Blasio will have more. The commercial is coming. We will continue our questioning next with Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow. Stick around. We'll have a lot more with some very anxious candidates just ahead.
So, all right, yeah, we're halfway through. I think, unfortunately, I'm going to end this. I have a court hearing tomorrow that I have to get ready for. Not serious, just about some property that I have. So I need to go to that. And so I'll probably be ending this here. I might watch the second half of the debate tomorrow and do a little video. But my thoughts on what I heard, I'm not, there's no one's really standing out as far as I'm concerned. Castro tried, to his credit, to stand out on the immigration thing, I think in a terrible way. I think that all these people were making huge mistakes when it comes to the general election of being able to take this crazy immigration stance that they have. I think it's going to be a huge mistake and going to be difficult because I think the average person is not for these open borders that we see that there's being advocated. So I think that's a terrible blunder that they're making. The healthcare business, I think that's a stronger suit that they'd be able to gain some ground on, but no one said anything too interesting as far as I'm concerned. For those of you who didn't know, there's going to be another debate with 10 Democrats tomorrow, I believe also on NBC. Maybe I'll be doing a live stream on it for a while as well. I don't know. That's going to include people like Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and other groups like that. So, yeah, I think that you could see here how left extremists that the Democratic Party is becoming. When you see people like me do videos that talk about how out of control the party is, it's not just me saying it. Look at the video. Look what they had to say on immigration. That's the people running for president. So take it for what you will. But thanks, everyone. If you haven't, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be putting out more material as the week goes on. And thanks, everyone. Have a good one.